Welcome to the penultimate review of Game of Thrones. Next week we got the last episode of the series, and today we just got the penultimate episode. And as you know, this review will be full of spoilers, as they all are for each episode. Let's face the facts. Last week, as much as anyone else, I hated the episode. I think most of it was out of character, most of it didn't make sense, it was just poor writing, and it even felt rushed towards the end especially. This episode turns things around for me. I haven't seen how other people feel. I honestly don't care when it comes to the purposes of this review. I loved this episode. This is back in the ranks of episode 2 of this season. This is one of my favorite episodes ever of this show. This is an excellently written, excellently directed, excellently shot episode. The drama, the stakes, the scale and scope of it all are there. In fact, this is the battle that they should have promoted all along and not the Battle of Winterfell. I mean, I am one of the few people who really enjoyed the Battle of Winterfell, actually. But still, this is so much more what that should have been. So because I loved this episode, let me first address what I didn't like about the episode. And that is Dany's decision of burning King's Landing. Disclaimer, it was fucking glorious to watch. And everything about it was amazing. Story-wise, here's my problem. To my surprise, even though I despise what they did with her last week specifically, how she exposed herself to Tyrion, her weaknesses, her fears, what had come to her making this decision, let it be fear. If she can't rule with love because nobody loves her, apparently, that's how she feels, she's going to rule by fear because she just doesn't have any more energy. She's losing people, she's losing the love of the people that used to love her. She had to burn Varys earlier in this episode, so she decides she will rule by fear. How she explains that to Tyrion, the execution of her character just breaking down to Tyrion Lannister, her hand, and still having that strength of next time you fail me will be the last time you fail me. I really like that. My big issue is that still there was a last drop kind of moment for Dany to decide to burn King's Landing. There's this moment where she completely destroys the fleet, which makes the fact that they killed Rhaegal last week even more stupid. She completely destroys the Iron Fleet, sends Euron running away, which was awesome, and she gets to King's Landing. And the Golden Army is surrounded, they're dropping their swords, and they're telling the Queen to ring the bells, which means in King's Landing that the city is surrendering. The people are surrendering to the new Queen, Daenerys Targaryen. She's seeing that. She's on top of Drogon, who's on top of a roof of some kind, and she sees that. And we see Cersei looking on, fear starting to install in her mind. And as the bells are ringing, Daenerys starts flying. And eventually we see Drogon flying over the people and the people being afraid. And boom, we don't even hear the Dracarys, us the audience. But she starts burning everything and everyone. Which again, it's glorious to watch. I don't think anyone can deny that. But to me there was a moment missing. A moment where Daenerys would go back on what she said, and she would look at the people and extend them a hand, metaphorically, show them a type of kindness from her heart that she truly has in her heart to show not only the people but herself and those that are starting to abandon her that she does have kindness, that she really isn't her father. And if there was a moment like that, where Dany extends, again metaphorically, a hand to the people as a gesture of kindness, and then directly at her, the people start, I don't know, throwing rocks, calling her names, truly showing fear and not believing in her, or saying that she will not be their queen, they're surrendering, but she will not be their queen because they don't accept her. That would have been the trigger. That would have been the last drop, the last bullet, whatever you want to put it as. That is the moment that was missing for me. That's the moment that really would have thrown Dany over the edge and would have totally worked. Again, for me, maybe you completely disagree and you are writing your thoughts below, whether you agree with me or not, whether the last drop for you would be something completely different, or there wasn't even closely things enough to put Dany in that place. My biggest problem really was that Dany just did that and we didn't see an ultimate thrown her off the cliff. I didn't see her falling into the precipice, into total darkness. And I wish I could have seen that. So that was my problem with this episode. And as soon as she starts burning up stuff, there's this moment where Tyrion is walking into King's Landing and he's covered in ash because before that she burned through the gates to the outside so that the Unsullied, the Dothraki, her army could walk into King's Landing. And the shot of Tyrion walking into King's Landing almost looks like everything is black and white except Tyrion. And he's realizing he's made a mistake. And on his part, I love what they did with him in this episode. Him saying goodbye to Varys, him standing all the way in the back. Not that Tyrion can do much in the battlefield, but Tyrion really has been a character that they have cherished and saved and protected. And another character that they have cherished and protected is Arya. Arya right now is the true MVP of the show. There's this shot of her and the Hound walking into King's Landing, and I saw that shot and I'm like, it's really telling to a character's development when you look at this picture right here. And you're not afraid of the 6+ foot guy. What you are afraid of is the little girl walking beside him. And there's this moment where they're going to separate. The Hound just tells her that if she stays, she'll die. And she will become like him. And she doesn't need to become like him. She doesn't want to become like him. And they separate. And I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for the first time, Arya turns to him and calls him Sandor. I even think she addresses him like she calls him anything directly at him and says thank you before they ultimately separate. It's a beautiful, beautiful moment. I just loved everything about this. I've loved everything about this relationship in this show. And Arya goes into the city, and we'll get more into what is happening with her as the city starts to crumble more and more. Goes to find his brother. It's the Clegane Bull, everybody. He kills like 4 or 5 soldiers going down the stairs, and then the Mountain starts looking at him with those bloodshot eyes of his, and he's walking down the stairs, and Cersei's like, stand with me, please, Sir Gregor. And he doesn't care, and Qyburn goes to hold him. and Qyburn next to the Mountain is like a Funko Pop. The Mountain just throws him off like a Funko Pop, and he just breaks. And Qyburn dies. And then Cersei just walks past really quickly as the castle is starting to fall, and there's this brutal, absolutely brutal fight between Sandor and the Mountain. They're breaking each other, and Sandor eventually pierces his sword through the Mountain's torso, but he doesn't die. He's already dead, and the moment where he takes the helmet off, it's like, oh, that's you. That's always been you. Love that. And eventually the Mountain's just punching and pounding on the Hound. He picks him up through the throat. He starts crushing his eyes like he did with Oberyn Martell, and the Hound gets a knife, a dagger actually, and he puts it through an eye of the Mountain, and he lets him go, and he's like, oh, what the fuck? And the Hound knows he can't last any longer. He has to die with his brother. It's the only way of making sure he kills him. Already one of his eyes is actually crushed. You can still see out the other, but it's pretty damaged as well. And he throws himself to go through a wall, and they die in fire. They fall into fire, and the Hound dies in fire as he felt he died the first time around was when his brother burnt his face. So as Daenerys is burning King's Landing, Jaime is trying to get to Cersei, and he goes under through the beach to the Red Keep, and he runs into Euron. They have a scuffle, really entertaining one, and Jaime kills another king, the king of the Iron Islands, even though he says that he is no king. But Jaime goes to Cersei, and he's actually rescuing her, which made me see his arc in a completely different manner. We always thought that he was going to kill Cersei. He was going there to kill her, to make sure that she stopped all the badness in Westeros, and he tries to save her. They eventually go into the crypts, and what this show does at its best was what it did right here, because there's a moment where they're in the crypts. I don't even know if they're called crypts, but whatever. They're underground next to the skull of the dragon, and Cersei's just crying. She's breaking down. She doesn't want to die. She doesn't want the baby to die, and Jaime tells her, "It's just you and me. Nothing else matters." And this is the moment where I saw Jaime's arc in a completely different manner, and I really, really love it, because it's almost like when you think you've moved on from somebody, but it really turns out you didn't. Jaime sleeping with Brienne, which is what we always thought his arc was, going to her and trying to kill Cersei, moving on from Cersei, he never really could move on from Cersei. And that's the curse that he had by having sex with his sister. I really loved it, and again, what the show is at its best is showcasing complex people. People can be so complex that this episode and this moment, this last moment between Cersei and Jaime before everything falls on top of them, made me feel sorry for Cersei. Fucking Cersei, which just speaks to the quality of the writing of this show when it's on. And still, as Daenerys is burning King's Landing, Jon Snow is turning against what her soldiers are doing. They're killing innocent people. They're killing the people of King's Landing. And Jon Snow is turning against her soldiers. And Jon Snow is killing soldiers of Daenerys' army here and there, right and left. And I really like that. Jon Snow in this episode showed me again why Jon Snow has always been my favorite character up until this point. At least. He was not out of character at all in this episode, and I'm very, very, very happy for it. And last but not least, who has been the MVP of this show for the longest time? Arya fucking Stark, after she separates from the Hound. She's running around the city trying to escape the fire from Drogon, trying to escape the soldiers of Daenerys, and she's trying to help people out. She just can't. She finds herself unable to, and I love, again, just like in the Battle of Winterfell, seeing Arya afraid. And there are these moments where she looks on to Daenerys as she's flying over her, and she's got a queen in her mind to kill. And eventually she's trying to help this mother and daughter running away from the fire, but the mother gets wounded that she can't run anymore. And she tells Arya to save her daughter, but the daughter wants to stay with the mother. And eventually she does, and after a big, big fire that engulfs most of the streets, Arya looks on and she sees the corpse of this mother and daughter embraced. Everything is burnt to crisps. Everyone is burned. King's Landing now has 0 inhabitants living in it, and Arya's just shocked, but now determined to set things right and kill one last person, since everyone else in her list is now dead. And she sees this horse, and there's almost relief in her face that she's seeing something alive. Boss Logic actually did this image. I want to shout him out because it's a great image, but it was what came to me as I saw this last scene, which, by the way, just this shot alone, or this one when she's in front of the horse, it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful shot. And what I actually thought when I saw this scene and this moment, not only is Arya relieved to see something alive, but I thought of this from Boss Logic. I thought she is death, and she's bringing death to the one who killed everything and everyone in King's Landing. So this episode, to me, thematically, narratively, structurally, was great. That was that big problem. It's one problem, but it's a big one that I have about Daenerys, because there's only one element missing in her downfall, but it's a big one. It's a key element when you're writing someone's downfall into darkness. I think this is top 5 Game of Thrones episodes. Still, there is a big problem. It's not perfect. I think it's amazing. I think it's spectacular. It's top-notch. This is how you really tell a story well. Again, when the show is on, it is on. I really love this episode. I am officially back on the hype train for Game of Thrones. I'm officially enjoying it again, and I cannot wait for the series finale and to bring you my review for that. So let me know what you guys thought of the penultimate episode of Game of Thrones called the bells. Let me know what you thought of everyone's involvement in this episode. What are your predictions for next week, the final episode, the final 90 minutes of Game of Thrones of all time? Thank you so much for watching. You guys are the best. I hope you enjoyed this episode half, at least, as much as I did. And I'll see you next week for a final review of Game of Thrones. So stay beautiful, stay geeky, and if you haven't done so yet, click the subscribe button and click the bell so we can be geeky united.